There are nights when the heart aches quietly beneath its own breath, when words seem too small to hold the weight of longing, when hope feels distant, like a star hidden behind clouds. In those moments, silence becomes prayer. This is where Hannah's story begins. Not in triumph, not in laughter, but in tears that fell softly against the earth. Tears that no one seemed to notice, except the one who listens even when no one speaks. Take a slow, deep breath. Let it fill your chest with calm. With every inhale, gather peace like morning light. With every exhale, let the noise of the day fade quietly away. If these stories bring you peace, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe for more nightly reflections, and share where you're listening from tonight. Your words and presence help keep this space warm and growing. Now, take another slow breath. Let's begin. The house around her was quiet, yet her heart was not. Hannah sat near the flicker of a small oil lamp, its light trembling like her thoughts. The night pressed gently against the windows, and the air was heavy with the ache of things unspoken. Year after year, she had come to this same place of prayer, her lips moving without sound, her eyes heavy with longing. She had no child, and the emptiness within her had begun to echo louder than any voice around her. There were others who did not understand, whose words cut quietly, whose laughter carried reminders of what she did not have. And yet, Hannah did not let bitterness make its home in her heart. Instead, she carried her ache like an offering, a fragile flame that she refused to let go out. Take another slow breath. Let it move through you gently. Imagine the quiet courtyard of the ancient temple, the scent of oil lamps and stone, a woman kneeling beneath the open sky, her hands trembling, her lips whispering, but her voice steady in its silence. She was not praying for attention. She was praying for mercy. And though no one else heard her, heaven did. The night breeze moved softly through the temple pillars. It carried with it the faintest sound, not words, but yearning. And in that yearning, faith breathed. Faith, not loud, not polished, but pure. The kind of faith that keeps believing when nothing seems to change. Hannah's tears fell like rain upon the earth, each one a seed, planted in sorrow, watered in hope. She did not know yet what they would grow into, but heaven did. Take another long, deep breath. Let the stillness of her devotion touch your own heart. The quiet places of longing within you are not forgotten. Every ache, every whisper, every unspoken prayer is heard by the one who sees in secret. The lamp flickered once, and the shadows along the walls seemed to bow gently, as if even they knew. that something holy was being born in silence. And as Hannah knelt there, her tears still falling softly, the heart of heaven leaned close. The temple was quiet that night, only the sound of oil crackling faintly in the lamps, only the hush of wind moving through the open courts. And beneath that quiet, one woman's breath, slow, trembling, full of ache and faith all at once. Hannah knelt low to the ground, her hands pressed lightly against the cool stone, her heart open, her body still. She did not speak loudly. She did not draw attention. Her lips moved without sound, because the prayer she prayed could not be formed by words. Take a long, slow breath. Let it move through you like calm water. With every inhale, feel the quiet strength that rises from surrender. With every exhale, release every thought that tries to explain what only faith can carry. She had carried this longing for years, through laughter that wasn't hers, through blessings that seemed to skip her name, through questions that had no answers, and nights that felt too long. Yet here she was again, in the same place, before the same God, her heart still open, still soft. It would have been easy to turn her pain into anger, to hide behind disappointment, to fold her arms and walk away from hope. But instead, she poured herself out. All of it, every tear, every ache, every unspoken question, like water spilling from a vessel until there was nothing left to give. And in that emptiness, something sacred began to take form. Because when a heart empties itself before God, it never stays empty for long. Take another gentle breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let the silence between words become its own kind of prayer. She whispered in the quiet, not loud enough for anyone to hear, only enough for heaven to understand. Lord, if you would only look upon me, if you would only remember me. Her voice broke, but her faith did not. In that moment, something changed, not in the world around her, but in the world within her. The weight she carried began to lift, not because her prayer was answered, but because it had been received. There is a holy kind of peace that comes when the soul knows it has been heard. It doesn't erase the waiting, but it fills it with light. The priest Eli sat nearby. He saw her lips move but heard no sound. He mistook her grief for confusion. But God saw differently. He did not see madness. He saw worship. He saw faith that would one day bloom into promise. Take another long, deep breath. Let it remind you that God's attention is not drawn by eloquence, but by honesty. Every unspoken ache, every tear that never finds a word, is already language to Him. The air around her seemed to soften. The temple stones seemed to breathe. Heaven itself leaned closer to listen to a prayer that would one day change history. She did not bargain with God that night. She surrendered. And in that surrender, peace began to form in the hollow places of her heart. When she finally rose, her face was still wet with tears, but her eyes carried something new, a quiet certainty. Not that her pain was gone, but that her prayer had reached its destination. Take one last slow, peaceful breath. Feel the stillness settle within you, the same stillness that found her heart that night. For God listens, even when all you have to offer is silence and tears. The days that followed were long, the kind of days that stretch like quiet fields, empty, endless. The prayer had been spoken, the tears had dried, but heaven's silence lingered like fog that refused to lift. Hannah walked through her home with gentle steps, carrying out her daily tasks, tending to what life still required of her. But beneath it all, there lived a deep and tender ache. The ache of waiting. Waiting is not a pause. It is a passage. And every passage feels like walking through unseen water. You can't see the bottom. You can only trust that it's there. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the air move softly through you. With each inhale, gather a sense of calm. With each exhale, let the weight of uncertainty begin to fade. Hannah waited, not knowing if the promise she carried in her heart would ever find form. She rose with the morning. She prayed with quiet lips. She moved through the rhythms of ordinary life, and yet every moment felt sacred. Because when the soul has truly surrendered, even waiting becomes worship. Still, there were moments that hurt. Moments when laughter in another room reminded her of what she lacked. Moments when hope felt fragile, like a candle flickering in a strong wind. And yet, she guarded that small flame, not with strength, but with faith. Her husband tried to comfort her. His words were kind, but they could not reach the place where only God's voice could heal. For some wounds are not meant to be fixed by people, they are meant to be transformed by time, by trust, by grace unseen. Take another long, quiet breath. Let your heart soften in the silence. There is holiness in the waiting, because it teaches the soul to rest in something larger than its understanding. There were nights when Hannah sat beneath the open sky, the stars above her countless, distant, and yet she whispered her prayer again, not to remind God, but to remind herself that she still believed. Lord, I am here, still waiting, still trusting. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the act of choosing to stay, even when you don't know how long the silence will last. Heaven listened still, not with haste, but with tenderness, because God does not delay out of neglect. He delays because he is shaping the miracle to fit perfectly into the heart that asked for it. Take another breath. Feel the space between hope and fulfillment. That quiet space where trust is tested, where character is formed, where faith is purified. Hannah learned to live there, between promise and proof, between prayer and answer. Her faith did not fade, it deepened. Every day she waited. Heaven was weaving, quietly, lovingly, preparing the time of remembrance. The lamp in her home glowed softly each evening, its flame steady, like her heart. And though she could not see it yet, her waiting was already becoming the soil where her miracle would bloom. Take one last deep, peaceful breath before rest. Let the stillness of her patience fill your own heart. Waiting is not wasted time. It is sacred preparation. For even when heaven seems silent, it is never still. There are moments in every soul's journey when heaven feels quiet, when the air stands still, when prayers seem to echo back unanswered. And yet, something deep within still whispers, "Keep believing." Hannah lived in that space for many seasons. Her prayer spoken, her tears remembered, and though her world appeared unchanged, heaven had already begun to move. She could not see it. She could not feel it. But the silence of God was not absence. It was artistry. Take a slow, deep breath. Let it move softly through you. With every inhale, gather calm like gentle water. With every exhale, release the fear that silence means you've been forgotten. The God who listens in the shadows hears differently than we do. He hears not just the words, but the heart behind them. Not just the prayer spoken once, but the faith that keeps whispering long after the voice grows tired. In the long days that followed, Hannah's hope wavered at times, but it never left her completely. There was something sacred about her persistence, that quiet courage to pray again, even when she didn't see results. The sun rose and set. The seasons turned quietly. Life continued its ordinary rhythm. But beneath the surface, something unseen was taking shape. God listens best in the quiet. He moves most beautifully in the dark, where roots grow deep, where faith learns patience, where trust becomes love. Take another long, slow breath. Let that truth rest gently within you. Even now, in your own waiting, He is listening in the shadows. The priest Eli passed by her once more. He had seen her weeping before and misunderstood her sorrow. But this time, something in her stillness made him pause. Her face no longer carried despair, but peace, a strange and quiet peace that glowed faintly even in her waiting. And he spoke softly, almost uncertainly, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant what you have asked of him." Simple words, but they carried the weight of divine agreement. Hannah bowed her head. She did not argue. She did not plead. She simply received. And in that moment, a bridge was built between her sorrow and her faith. Take another deep, tender breath. Let the stillness surround you. Sometimes, heaven answers before we even realize it. Sometimes the promise is already alive, quietly beating beneath the surface of the unseen. The God who listens in the shadows does not need to announce his plans. He moves in mystery. He weaves light into dark. He hides miracles inside of moments that seem ordinary. That night, as Hannah lay beneath the canopy of stars, the breeze moved gently through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, her heart rested. She no longer needed to feel heard, because she knew she was. The shadows around her did not frighten her anymore, because now she understood that even there, God was near. Take one last long, slow breath before rest. Let that truth settle deep, that the silence of heaven is not neglect. It is nurture. You are seen. You are heard. And your prayers are already finding their way home. The morning rose slowly. The sun warmed the edges of the hills, and the first light of day slipped quietly into the home where Hannah prayed. Something within her felt different now. Not louder, not brighter, just steadier. Like peace had settled in places where sorrow used to live. Her prayer had not vanished into the wind. It had become something else. A promise. Invisible but alive. A seed sown in heaven's garden, waiting for its season to bloom. Take a deep, slow breath. Let it move through you like sunlight through still water. With every inhale, feel the warmth of hope rising quietly in your chest. With every exhale, release the fear that what you've prayed for has been forgotten. There is a sacred moment in every prayer, when it stops being a request and becomes a promise. Not because you have the proof, but because you have peace. Hannah had reached that moment. The tears still came sometimes, but they no longer carried despair. Her sorrow had turned into expectancy, her grief into trust. She rose from her place of prayer, her eyes soft, her steps light. There was no thunder, no sign in the sky, only a still heart that knew something had shifted between heaven and earth. For he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. The same God who sent his messengers to protect would now send his answer to comfort. The morning light filled her home like a promise whispered in gold. Her husband saw the change too, a quiet radiance. The heaviness that once shadowed her gaze was gone. "Are you well?" he asked softly. And she smiled. Not with certainty, but with faith. "Yes. My heart is at peace. Take another long, slow breath. Let it soften your own heart as it softened hers. Sometimes, peace arrives before the answer, because peace is the first part of the answer. Hannah began to live differently now, not because her circumstances had changed, but because she had. Every meal felt like a prayer of gratitude, every sunrise like a reminder that God had heard. She no longer prayed with desperation. She prayed with devotion, not demanding, but trusting. In the quiet evenings, when the air cooled and the lamps flickered in their soft glow, she would sit near the doorway, her hands resting upon her heart, whispering, "Thank you, Lord, for what I cannot yet see." Faith had become her rhythm, patience her song, and though she did not yet know it, heaven had already begun to move, angels stirring the threads of time, preparing the answer that would change her life forever. Take another deep, gentle breath. Let the peace of her trust wash over you. The waiting heart is never empty when it is full of faith. The prayer that became a promise is the one heaven holds closest. The stars would shine again that night. The same sky, the same silence, but something within the silence had changed. It was now alive, with unseen life, with the whisper of fulfillment drawing near. Take one last slow, peaceful breath before resting. Let the warmth of her faith settle into your own spirit. Even in stillness, heaven is moving. Even in silence, promises are taking form. The temple stood quiet beneath the morning sky. Pale light slipped between the stone columns, brushing against the floors that had carried so many prayers. It was here, in this sacred space, that Hannah once knelt in anguish. And it was here that heaven had begun to turn her sorrow into song. The seasons had shifted since that night of tears. The earth had spun its patient circles, and what once felt empty inside her now carried a different stillness, not hollow, but full. The whisper at the temple door had become a memory she carried like treasure. The gentle voice of Eli, once misunderstood, now remembered with quiet reverence. Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant what you have asked of him. She could still feel those words, not as sound, but as warmth. They had wrapped themselves around her soul like a cloak against the chill of doubt. Take a long, slow breath. Let it move gently through you. With every inhale, gather that same peace that once covered her. With every exhale, let go of the ache that waits for proof before it trusts. Faith is not built in the moment of receiving. It is built in the quiet hours when you choose to believe that you already have been heard. Each morning, Hannah would pass near the temple gates, her footsteps slow, her eyes thoughtful. Sometimes she would pause just long enough to listen to the soft hum of the wind moving through the pillars. And though no voice spoke aloud, she could feel something familiar in that hush. It was as though heaven whispered her name each time she drew near. The God who listens never forgets the sound of your voice. And so she waited. But her waiting no longer hurt. It had become communion, a quiet companionship with the one who had taken her tears and turned them into prayer. The townspeople went about their days. Children ran through the streets. The smell of bread baking filled the air. Life continued. But for Hannah, the ordinary had become sacred. She began to notice the world differently. The laughter of children no longer stung, it stirred something gentle within her. The sunrise no longer felt like another day of waiting. It felt like a reminder that God keeps His promises with perfect timing. Take another deep, slow breath. Let the stillness fill you. Faith is not measured by the noise it makes. It is measured by the quietness it can hold. One morning, as she stood once again before the temple door, the air seemed to shimmer faintly, not in sight, but in spirit. It felt as though a whisper moved through the unseen, something soft and certain. Not yet a voice, but the beginning of an answer. She could not explain it. She could only smile faintly. And as she turned to walk home, her hand brushed gently over her heart. Where once there had been ache, now there was peace. Where once there had been silence, now there was a whisper. The whisper of heaven saying, "Soon." Take another long, gentle breath. Let that word rest deep within your spirit. Every promise has its season. And when the soil of faith is ready, the seed begins to stir. The temple doors behind her creaked softly in the wind. Their sound blended with the morning air. And to her, it felt like music. Not the music of instruments, but the quiet melody of divine timing. Take one last slow, peaceful breath before resting. Let the calm of her trust fill you like sunlight through open air. The same God who whispered to Hannah still whispers to those who wait. And His voice, though soft, always keeps its word. There are moments, even in the gentlest hearts, when hope begins to ache. When believing starts to feel like lifting something too heavy to carry. When faith, though still alive, trembles under the weight of time. Hannah knew that feeling well. Days passed, then weeks. The seasons began to turn again. Soft winds giving way to warmer sun. And though peace still lived within her, there were nights when the quiet returned. Nights when the ache of waiting pressed upon her chest like a memory that would not rest. Take a long, slow breath. Let the air move gently through you. With every inhale, draw in calm. With every exhale, release the weight that clings to hope when the waiting feels too long. Hannah sat by the window one evening, the room lit only by the glow of the fading sun, shadows reaching softly across the floor, her hands folded, her thoughts wandering between faith and weariness. "Lord," she whispered into the air, "did you still remember me?" But even as she spoke, she felt it, that quiet stillness that always answered before words came. A peace that did not deny her question, but wrapped around it tenderly, as if heaven itself leaned close to say, "Yes, I remember." Faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the courage to bring doubt into the presence of God and let Him hold it for you. The breeze outside moved through the olive trees, their branches swaying gently like hands lifted in quiet worship. And as she listened, Hannah's breath began to match the rhythm of the wind. Slow, steady, surrendered. She thought back to the temple that day, to the whisper at the door, to the warmth that filled her heart. She remembered the words of Eli, and the peace that had followed. And she realized, faith was not a straight path. It was a winding one. Some days, she walked with certainty. Other days, she crawled through shadow. But every step still moved her closer to promise. Take another deep, quiet breath. Let that truth settle in your spirit. Even when hope feels heavy, it is still holy. Even when you feel weary, heaven still moves. There were nights when she would lift her eyes to the stars and find comfort there. The same stars Abraham once counted. The same sky that had held the promises of generations. She remembered that the God who had written faith into their stories was now writing hers. And though she could not yet see the next chapter, she trusted the author. Her tears came again. But this time they were not born of despair. They were born of release. Because when hope feels too heavy, sometimes you have to let God carry it for you. Take another slow, deep breath. Let it fill you like light fills a quiet room. You do not have to hold your faith perfectly. You only have to keep holding it at all. The room grew darker, the last light fading beyond the hills. But Hannah did not rise to light a lamp. She sat in the dark for a while, hands resting on her knees, feeling the warmth of peace grow in her heart again. It was not loud. It was not certain. But it was enough. And in that quiet enough, God smiled. Take one last gentle breath before rest. Let the stillness of her trust calm the ache inside you. Even when hope feels heavy, heaven's hands are beneath it. And in their keeping, no prayer is ever lost. The night had returned, soft, deep, still. The world outside wrapped in its familiar hush of darkness. But within Hannah's heart, a gentler silence had begun to bloom. The ache was still there, faint but real. It lingered like the final echo of a song that refused to fade. And yet, woven through that ache, was something new. A quiet knowing that she had been seen. For the Lord sees not as man sees, the ancient words whispered through her spirit. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And Hannah's heart, though tired, was radiant before him. Take a deep, slow breath. Let it move softly through your chest. With every inhale, gather calm like gentle light. With every exhale, release the need to be understood by anyone but God. For he had seen every tear that had fallen onto the temple floor, every sigh that escaped her lips in the dark, every wordless prayer that trembled in her throat and never found its sound. He had counted them all, not as sorrow, but as seed. The eyes of heaven miss nothing, even in the places where silence reigns. His gaze is steady, his heart near. Hannah did not know it yet, but even as she sat in the quiet of her room, the tide of her story had begun to turn. What she had planted in tears, heaven had already begun to water in mercy. Take another gentle breath. Let your shoulders fall. Let your heart soften into stillness. The tears you cry before God are not wasted. They are gathered. She lifted her face toward the window. The moonlight slipped across her cheeks like a tender hand. It shimmered along the edge of her tears, turning each drop into silver light. And for the first time in years, she smiled through her crying, because something deep inside her spirit whispered, "I see you, and I will not forget you." That whisper was not her own voice. It was his. The God who sees every sparrow fall, the one who called stars by name, had seen her too. And where others saw only barrenness, he saw promise waiting to bloom. Take another deep, slow breath. Let that truth fill your spirit. You are seen in the moments you hide. You are known in the silence you keep. You are loved in the tears you can't explain. Hannah's faith did not erase her pain. It redefined it. Her tears were no longer symbols of despair. They had become offerings, small vessels of worship carried upward into unseen hands. The air in the room shifted slightly. The lamp flame flickered, and for just a heartbeat, the space around her felt alive, as though angels stood quietly nearby, watching, waiting, rejoicing in a faith that refused to die. Take one last long, soft breath before rest. Let it settle in you like dawn waiting beneath the horizon. The eyes that saw Hannah's tears are the same eyes that see yours. And to those eyes, no sorrow is hidden, no prayer unheard. Morning came softly, the sky painted in pale hues of gold and rose. A gentle light drifted through the window, falling across Hannah's resting face. The stillness of night had lifted, but peace remained. The kind of peace that doesn't vanish when the sun rises. The kind that lingers because it was planted by God Himself. The world outside began to stir, footsteps in the courtyards, soft voices, the clinking of clay jars. But Hannah stayed still, wrapped in that fragile quiet that follows answered prayer. Not answered in sight yet, but answered in spirit. She rose slowly, her heart lighter than the day before, not because everything had changed, but because she had. She remembered the words of Eli, the priest who had once misunderstood her sorrow, and she heard them again, echoing softly within her memory. Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant what you have asked of Him. Those words had followed her home like sunlight follows morning. They were no longer a blessing from a man. They had become a promise from heaven. Take a long, slow breath. Let the air fill your lungs gently. With every inhale, receive that same peace that once covered her. With every exhale, let go of every doubt that tries to question what God has already heard. Hannah stepped outside. The wind brushed softly through her hair, carrying with it the scent of new life, of barley, of fresh earth, of quiet beginnings. And in that breeze, it felt as though heaven itself was breathing upon her. The blessing spoken over her was not lost to time. It had taken root in the unseen. Because words spoken in faith, no matter how softly, always find their way to fulfillment. She whispered back into the morning, a prayer, simple and calm. Thank you for hearing me, even when I could not find the words. Her eyes lifted toward the temple in the distance. Its pillars gleamed faintly in the light, and though she stood far from it now, she felt closer to God than she ever had before. The world around her was ordinary, but to her, it had become holy. Because the same God who met her in the temple still walked with her in the quiet places of her home. Take another deep, slow breath. Let it rest inside you like still water. You don't need to be in sacred buildings to receive sacred blessings. Wherever faith breathes, there heaven listens. The blessing Eli spoke had awakened something inside her, a confidence not in her circumstances, but in God's heart. She no longer carried her request like a burden. She carried it like a seed, small, hidden, but destined to grow. Even the way she moved began to change. The heaviness in her shoulders softened. The lines of worry across her brow faded. Because peace, once it enters the heart, begins to alter everything around it. Take another soft breath. Let it flow through you like gentle wind across still fields. What heaven blesses cannot be undone by time. What is spoken in faith remains alive in eternity. That day, Hannah went about her work, her heart humming with a quiet rhythm of gratitude. She did not know the timing. She did not need to. She simply knew. She had been heard. The blessing had not been shouted in the streets. It had been whispered in the quiet. And that was enough. Take one last deep, peaceful breath before rest. Let the quiet of that blessing settle in your spirit. You do not need loud proof when you already have a gentle promise. For the words spoken in faith still echo in heaven. And heaven always keeps its word. The sun rose quietly over Ramah. Its light spilled gently across the hills, turning the dust of the path into gold. The air was cool still, carrying the faint fragrance of olive trees and morning dew. And in that first light, Hannah walked with her husband Elkanah, her steps unhurried, her spirit light. It was the morning after the prayer that changed everything. The morning after surrender had turned to peace. The morning after her heart finally found its rest in the God who listens. There was no thunder in the sky. No visible sign that the heavens had shifted. Yet within her, something eternal had begun to stir. Take a long, slow breath. Let the morning air of the story fill your own chest. With every inhale, gather warmth and trust. With every exhale, release the quiet doubts that still linger around your prayers. Hannah's home was simple. Clay walls, woven mats, the faint smell of freshly baked bread still lingering in the air. Life went on as it always had, the same chores, the same laughter in distant rooms. But something invisible had changed the atmosphere entirely. It was lighter now, softer, as though peace itself had taken residence in the home. Elkanah noticed it too. He saw it in her eyes, in the way she moved, in the quiet smile that never quite left her lips. He did not ask what had happened. He simply knew his wife had been touched by heaven. She rose each morning now not in despair, but in hope. She would whisper gentle prayers as she kneaded the dough. She would hum softly while drawing water from the well. And sometimes, while no one watched, she would pause, place her hand upon her heart, and close her eyes. Not to ask, but to thank. Faith had changed her posture. Her waiting had turned into worship. Take another deep, soft breath. Let it move through you like a quiet current of peace. Faith does not always remove the waiting, but it transforms what waiting feels like. The world did not know what was coming. No one could see the invisible thread that heaven had already begun to weave through her life. But the eyes of God had never left her. The promise was already alive, even before she felt it. There is a sacred calm that rests on those who have been heard. Hannah carried that calm with her now. And though no one else could see it, the angels who stood near surely did. They moved quietly around her home, unseen sentinels of light. guarding the one whose prayer had touched eternity. Take another long, slow breath. The same peace that found her then can find you now. It is the peace that does not depend on visible answers. It is the peace that lives in the knowing that God is faithful even when His timeline is hidden. As the sun climbed higher, the house began to fill with gentle sounds, the scrape of pottery, the laughter of servants, the distant call of birds. And yet, above all of it, Hannah could still hear the quiet rhythm of her heart. Steady, certain, alive. It no longer beat with desperation, but with gratitude. And in that simple, steady morning, heaven smiled. Because the prayer that once began in tears had now become a song of trust. Take one last deep, peaceful breath before resting. Let the calm of Hannah's morning fill your own spirit. Faith is not proven by what you receive. It is proven by what you continue to believe in the quiet, after you've prayed. And in that quiet, heaven moves. Time passed softly. Days folded into weeks. Weeks into months. The rhythms of life continued. The same sunrises, the same fields, the same familiar paths. Yet within Hannah's heart, something new had begun to glow quietly, like an ember under still air. She did not know when it happened. She only knew that one morning, as she sat in the gentle light by the window, she felt something deep within her spirit whisper, "You have been remembered." It was not a sound, not a voice carried by wind. It was the quiet knowing that fills a soul when heaven keeps its word. Take a slow, deep breath. Let it move gently through you. With every inhale, gather the peace of being known. With every exhale, let go of the thought that God ever forgets those He loves. For the Lord remembered Hannah. The words that would one day be written across generations were first felt in her spirit long before they were recorded. It was the remembrance of love, not of pity. The remembrance of promise, not of delay. Heaven does not forget what faith has spoken. In the months that followed, her heart grew full with wonder. Each sunrise felt like a secret between her and God. Each moment carried the echo of that whisper, "You have been remembered." She would touch her belly sometimes, gently, reverently, and tears would fill her eyes, not tears of pain this time, but of awe. The very body that once ached with emptiness was now alive with promise. A miracle moving quietly within her. A living answer to prayers once spoken in silence. Take another slow, long breath. Let the miracle of remembrance rest softly in your heart. To be remembered by heaven is to be written into eternity's story. No prayer of faith ever disappears. It only waits for its appointed time. The angels that once watched her in sorrow now watched her in joy. They had carried her tears before the throne, and now they rejoiced to see them transformed into life itself. The air around her home seemed brighter, the light that touched her face softer. Even the wind through the trees carried a new sound, a melody of fulfillment, low and sweet. God's remembrance is not like ours. He does not recall with nostalgia. He acts with purpose. When He remembers, He moves. And when He moves, creation responds. Take another gentle breath. Let gratitude rise like dawn within you. Every moment of waiting, every hour of silence, had led to this quiet miracle. She was not forgotten in the delay. She was prepared by it. The child growing within her was more than an answer. He was a reflection of her faith. Her waiting had not broken her. It had shaped her. And now, as her hands rested over her heart, she whispered softly, "Thank you, Lord. You never forgot me." Her husband watched her with wonder. He did not need to ask. He could see heaven's work in her eyes. The peace she carried was no longer only spiritual. It was visible, radiant. Take one last long, peaceful breath before rest. Let the truth of remembrance settle deep inside you. God does not overlook what is entrusted to Him. He holds it until the perfect moment. And when that moment comes, His remembrance feels like sunrise after a long night. The night is gone now for Hannah. The promise lives within her. And heaven, still watching, smiles softly in return. The house was filled with stillness that morning. The kind of stillness that feels full, sacred, alive. Outside, the light filtered through olive branches, soft rays of gold dancing upon the clay walls. And within those walls, a promise had taken its first breath. A cry broke the silence, small, fragile, beautiful. A sound that reached beyond the room, beyond the home, all the way to heaven itself. Hannah held the child in her arms, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from awe. She looked down at him, eyes wide, voice caught between laughter and tears. The one she had prayed for had come. Take a deep, slow breath. Let the moment sink into your spirit. With every inhale, gather the sweetness of answered prayer. With every exhale, release the weight of waiting that once felt endless. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of Him. Her whisper was barely audible, but the words trembled with the power of faith fulfilled. She traced her finger gently along his tiny hand, and felt her heart melt with a love she had only imagined before. Every sleepless night, every tear shed in the temple, every whispered prayer beneath the stars, it all found meaning in that single heartbeat now pressing against her chest. The angels who had watched her cry now sang softly in the unseen. Their wings brushed the air like a hush of praise. Their light shimmered faintly around the mother and her son. Take another long, gentle breath. Let that peace fill you completely. Heaven does not forget the faithful. It builds miracles quietly, in the timing of eternity. Hannah named him Samuel, because I asked the Lord for him, not as a boast, but as a testimony. Each time she spoke his name, it was a whisper of gratitude, a living reminder that prayer and promise are not separate. They are one continuous breath of love. She rocked him gently as morning drifted toward noon, the air warm and golden, the sound of distant laughter echoing faintly through the courtyard. But for her, time had slowed. All that mattered was this, that the God who sees, who listens, who remembers, had answered. The child's small fingers curled around hers, his breathing soft and steady, and Hannah leaned her head against his, whispering softly, "You are not mine alone. You belong to the one who heard me." Her voice trembled slightly, not from sadness, but from reverence. For deep within her heart, she already knew that this child would not just be her comfort, but God's instrument. Take another deep, slow breath. Let the awe of her surrender fill you. Even in her joy, Hannah's faith did not cling. It gave. Because love, when born of heaven, always points back to heaven. The morning sun climbed higher, its warmth touching the child's face, and for a moment, it seemed as though the whole world exhaled in relief. A promise had been fulfilled. A prayer had become life. Hannah looked toward the temple in the distance, its outline faint against the horizon, and she smiled through tears. "Lord, you remembered me, and I will remember you." Take one last peaceful breath before rest. Let gratitude move through you like a slow current of light. Every answered prayer carries the same truth, that love does not forget, and that heaven's timing, though often slow, is always perfect. In her arms, the child of promise sighed softly in his sleep, and somewhere beyond sight, heaven smiled again. The morning sun shimmered across the hills of Ramah. Its light poured like honey through the branches, warming the soft clay beneath Hannah's feet as she stood at her doorway. In her arms, her son Samuel stirred, the child of prayer, the promise fulfilled, the living echo of heaven's mercy. His breath was steady, his face peaceful, and in her heart, a melody began to rise, not a song of words, but of wonder. It was the sound of gratitude, ancient and holy, the kind that wells up when the soul has seen what it once only hoped for. Take a slow, deep breath. Let it move gently through you. With every inhale, gather the quiet joy of fulfillment. With every exhale, release the remnants of sorrow that once clung to your faith. There are songs only born after seasons of silence, and Hannah's song was one of them. She closed her eyes, and her lips began to move softly, My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is lifted high. There is no one holy like the Lord. No one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. Each word fell like water over dry earth, washing away years of grief. It was not a song of pride. It was not a song of possession. It was a song of surrender, of love returned to its source, of gratitude overflowing into praise. Take another deep, slow breath. Let the rhythm of her song flow through your spirit. Every note of thanksgiving becomes a bridge between earth and heaven. Hannah's heart was full, but it did not cling. She knew this child was both gift and trust. That what she had received was not hers to keep forever, but hers to cherish and dedicate. And so she sang, not for herself alone, but for the God who turns sorrow into laughter, waiting into birth, tears into testimony. Her voice drifted beyond her home, across the hills, through the morning air. It mingled with the sounds of birds and breeze, becoming part of creation's eternal hymn. My heart rejoices in the Lord, she whispered again, and even the olive trees seemed to sway in agreement. Take another slow, tender breath. Gratitude is not loud. It is steady, like a heartbeat aligned with grace. It doesn't erase the pain that came before. It transforms it into something beautiful. The angels who once carried her tears now carried her song. Their wings shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Their faces calm, joyful, radiant. For heaven delights in gratitude that is pure, thanksgiving that flows from remembrance of mercy. Hannah's song would one day be remembered by generations, echoed in the praises of Mary, sung in the hearts of the faithful across ages. But for now, it was simply a mother and her God, a song rising softly from a heart that had been broken, and healed, and made whole again. Take another deep, gentle breath. Let it fill you with warmth. Let gratitude flow through you like a quiet river. Even now, every thank you whispered in the dark becomes part of that same eternal song. The morning wind carried her melody through the valley, across distant rooftops, into fields where shepherds tended their flocks. It blended with the hum of the earth, the universal rhythm of worship. And in that quiet harmony between heaven and heart, Hannah smiled through tears, her song now part of eternity. Take one last long, peaceful breath before rest. Gratitude is its own kind of prayer, and every grateful heart sings a song that heaven never stops hearing. The sun had climbed high in the sky. Its light glowed warm across the stone paths leading to Shiloh. The air shimmered faintly in the stillness, carrying the scent of grain and oil, of sacrifice and devotion. In her arms, Hannah held Samuel, now no longer a newborn, but still small enough to rest against her shoulder. His eyes, wide and bright, reflected the peace she had prayed her whole life to feel. And yet, this was not a journey of holding on. It was a journey of letting go. Take a slow, deep breath. Let it move softly through you. With every inhale, feel love gathering gently in your chest. With every exhale, let go of the need to keep what God has given for yourself. The path to the temple was the same one she had walked in tears years before. Then, she came empty-handed, her heart full of longing. Now, she came full-hearted, her hands carrying the very promise she had once begged for. Elkanah walked beside her, silent, reverent. Even he could feel that this was no ordinary offering. This was love returning to its source. When they reached the temple gates, the wind stirred lightly, and the sound of it carried something sacred, like the echo of her prayer from long ago. The same walls that once heard her weep would now hear her rejoice. She stepped forward slowly, her arms tightening around the child just once more before she spoke. Lord, for this child I prayed, and you have given me my request. Now I give him back to you. For all his days, he shall belong to you. Her voice was soft, but steady, every word a blend of devotion and surrender. Take another deep, slow breath. Let that moment fill you with peace. True love is not proven by possession. It is revealed through release. Hannah's hands trembled slightly as she placed Samuel into Eli's care. The old priest looked upon her with gentle eyes, and perhaps for the first time truly understood her faith. For she did not give in sorrow. She gave in trust. The angels who had once carried her prayers now stood in awe. Because this kind of faith, the faith that gives back what it most cherishes, is the rarest form of worship. The child reached for her hand one last time, tiny fingers brushing hers, and Hannah smiled through tears, whispering softly, "Be brave, my son. You are where you belong." The wind moved again, warm and light. It wrapped around her like a silent embrace from heaven. For every offering made in love returns multiplied in grace. Take another long, gentle breath. Let your own heart rest in the rhythm of her surrender. The hands that release to God never remain empty. They are always filled again, with peace, with purpose, with joy unseen. As she turned to leave the temple, Hannah felt no bitterness, only quiet awe. For she understood now, her story had never been about loss. It had always been about love learning to trust its Creator completely. The path back home was the same, but it no longer felt heavy. The stones beneath her feet seemed softer, the air lighter. Every step felt like worship. Take one final slow, deep breath before rest. Let the peace of her surrender become the peace of your own. For when love returns what it has received with gratitude, heaven always draws nearer. And somewhere, high above the temple, the angels spread their wings across the golden light, whispering softly into the breeze. She gave, and love was multiplied. The temple doors closed softly behind her, and with each step Hannah took away from Shiloh, the world seemed to breathe differently. The air was gentle, the sky vast and calm. Even the sound of her sandals upon the earth carried a rhythm of peace. There had been tears. There had been years of waiting. There had been sleepless nights filled with prayer and questions. But now, every ache that once lived inside her heart had settled into stillness. Because peace had finally come. Take a deep, slow breath. Let it fill your chest with calm. With every inhale, gather the warmth of surrender. With every exhale, let go of the need to understand why some seasons must hurt before they heal. The road stretched ahead, quiet, sunlit, familiar. The same path she once walked in sorrow now carried her home in serenity. The woman who once trembled with uncertainty now moved with grace. For peace is not the absence of storms. It is the strength to stand within them, and still believe that God is good. She thought of Samuel, of his soft breathing as he slept in the temple, of the way the morning light had rested upon his face when she left. Her heart ached, but it did not break. Because what she had placed in God's hands was safer than anything she could have held herself. The breeze moved softly through the valley, and in that wind she heard it again, that whisper she had known from the beginning. You are not forgotten. You are never alone. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening in the sunlight. It was the same voice that had comforted her in her weeping, the same voice that had whispered promise into her emptiness, the same voice that now wrapped her heart in quiet peace. Take another long, slow breath. Let your spirit rest in the truth that every storm ends, even if not in the way we expect. For peace is the final gift of faith. As the road curved along the hillside, the fields shimmered golden under the afternoon light. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance, and Hannah felt her heart swell with gratitude for the ordinary, for life still unfolding in small, beautiful ways. She no longer needed signs or answers. Her soul had found something deeper, contentment. For when peace comes after a storm, it is not loud or proud. It is humble, like sunlight resting on still water. It does not erase the memory of pain. It redeems it. Hannah paused for a moment on the path, looking back toward the temple one last time. It shimmered faintly in the distance, golden light glancing off its stones. She whispered softly, "Thank you for the storm that led me here." Take another gentle breath. Let gratitude fill your heart the way it filled hers. Peace is not found when we get what we want. It is found when we trust the one who knows what we need. The wind carried her words away, upward, across the valley, toward the heavens that had once seemed so silent. But they were not silent now. They were alive with the sound of her peace. The God who had watched her weep now watched her walk in calm. And every step she took was worship. Take one last long, soothing breath before rest. Let your body soften. Let your thoughts grow quiet. Every storm has its sunset. Every prayer has its peace. And when faith has done its work, what remains is rest. The seasons turned quietly in the hills of Ramah. The olive trees bent beneath gentle winds. The earth breathed in rhythms of harvest and rest, of dusk and dawn. And through it all, Hannah's faith remained, calm, steady, unwavering. There were days when the ache of separation brushed her heart. Days when she missed the sound of Samuel's laughter echoing through her home. When the silence of his absence felt tender and wide, like a missing note in a beloved song. But even then, her faith did not falter. Because faith, true faith, does not depend on what is seen. It depends on who is trusted. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the air move gently through your chest. With every inhale, draw in the peace of surrender. With every exhale, release the longing that asks for proof. Every year, she and Elkanah would return to Shiloh, carrying small garments she had sewn with her own hands. A linen robe, simple,
pure,
made with love stitched into every thread. And as she laid it across the priest's table, she would whisper softly, "For the child who serves before the Lord." Her eyes would fill with tears, but they were not tears of loss. They were tears of pride, of gratitude, of reverence. For she saw now that her offering had not left her empty, it had multiplied her joy. God had turned her sorrow into song, and her faith into legacy. Take another gentle breath. Let that truth move through you like soft wind through open branches. Every act of faith plants a seed that grows beyond what we can see. The temple courtyards were familiar now, not places of pain, but of remembrance. When she knelt there, she no longer wept in longing. She prayed in thanksgiving. Her whispers carried peace now instead of plea. Thank you, Lord, for hearing me once, and for hearing me still. The priests watched her sometimes as she prayed, quiet, humble, radiant. Perhaps they did not know her story in full, but heaven did. And every time she knelt, angels bowed their heads in gentle recognition of a faith that never wavered. Take another long, soft breath. Let peace settle into your own heart as it had settled into hers. Faith that does not falter is not the loud kind. It does not demand miracles. It simply remains, like a candle that refuses to go out in the wind. Hannah's home became a place of warmth and reverence. She would tell neighbors about God's mercy. She would share her story not as triumph, but as testimony. And those who heard her felt comfort, because they saw in her a woman who had been held by heaven. The faith that once trembled in tears now stood firm in peace. It was faith that had endured, not through signs or wonders, but through love and patience, through surrender and trust. Take another long, deep breath. Feel the quiet strength of her spirit echo through your own. Faith that endures does not rush. It rests. It knows that what is promised will always come, even if not in the form expected. The years passed, and each visit to Shiloh deepened her peace. Samuel grew strong in the service of the Lord, his voice rising in prayer and praise. And Hannah, from afar, watched the promise of her faith unfold before her eyes. The God who once met her in tears now met her in tranquility. Take one last slow, peaceful breath before rest. Let the steady calm of her enduring faith hold you tonight. Because when faith does not falter, even in silence or sorrow, it becomes the quiet flame that keeps the world warm with hope. The evening sky hung low and golden. The last rays of sunlight spilled across the fields of Ramah, and the sound of the wind moved through the olive trees. Soft, rhythmic, eternal. Hannah stood outside her home, hands clasped gently in front of her, eyes lifted toward the horizon. It had been many years since that night of tears in the temple. Many years since she had whispered her ache into the quiet air and felt heaven bend close to listen. And yet, even now, the memory of that prayer was vivid, alive, sacred. She remembered the weight of her sorrow, the trembling of her hands, the moment her voice broke and words failed her, and how, in that silence, God heard everything she could not say. Take a slow, deep breath. Let it move through you like a sigh of peace. With every inhale, gather the comfort of being known completely. With every exhale, release the fear that any prayer is ever lost to time. For God remembers every cry. Not one tear shed in faith disappears into the ground. Each one becomes part of a river that flows toward his heart. And in his perfect time, he answers, not with noise or haste, but with love that never misses its mark. Hannah's eyes shimmered as she gazed into the distance. Somewhere beyond those hills, her son was growing into a man, serving in the temple, speaking words of truth, walking in light. Each time she thought of him, her heart swelled with awe, because she saw how the hand of God had shaped every step of their story. The God who once saw her cry had remembered her again and again. Take another long, Slow breath. Let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts settle like dust after a summer rain. Every ache once lifted in prayer remains sacred in the heart of heaven. The stars began to appear one by one, each spark a silent witness to the faith of those who trusted through tears. And as Hannah watched them rise, she felt a deep warmth within her chest. The peace of knowing that nothing in her life, not the sorrow, not the silence, not the waiting, had been wasted. Every cry had become part of a larger story. A story of love, of mercy, of remembrance. There is something holy about being remembered by God. It is not that He ever forgets, it is that He brings all things into their appointed time. And when that time comes, what once hurt becomes holy. Take another deep, calm breath. Let it remind you of this truth, that your prayers live longer than your pain. Even when you think the echo has faded, heaven is still carrying the sound. Hannah turned slowly back toward her home. The night air cool against her skin. The sound of the breeze through the olive trees like a song she had always known. It was the sound of God's faithfulness, gentle, constant, near. She whispered softly into the twilight, "You have remembered me again, in ways I did not even ask for." And she smiled. The peace that settled in her heart was deeper than joy. It was the peace that comes when you realize that love has been listening all along. Take one last long, peaceful breath before rest. Let it fill your spirit with warmth and quiet assurance. God remembers every cry, every whisper, every tear shed in faith. He gathers them like jewels, holds them close, and in His time, He turns them into light. The night had deepened over Ramah. The stars shimmered softly above the hills, and the moon, pale and kind, hung low over the fields where quiet wind moved through the grass like a whisper of prayer. Inside her home, Hannah sat near the faint glow of an oil lamp. Its flame danced gently, painting golden shapes across the walls. The house was still, the air warm with peace, and for the first time in many years, she felt completely, utterly at rest. Take a long, deep breath. Let the air move slowly through you. With every inhale, gather stillness. With every exhale, let go of every thought that asks what might have been. There was a time when rest had been far from her, when her heart had lived in tension between faith and ache, when her prayers had carried more tears than words. But those nights were gone now. The same hands that once trembled in longing now rested calmly in her lap. The same lips that once whispered in anguish now curved softly in peace. For Hannah had found what every weary soul seeks, not rest in circumstance, but rest in trust. She had learned that peace is not the end of the story. It is the thread that runs quietly through every chapter. It does not come from receiving everything you ask for. It comes from knowing that you were never alone while waiting. Take another gentle, slow breath. Let that truth linger deep within you. Rest begins where striving ends. Outside, the crickets sang softly in the grass. The world moved in its nighttime rhythm. Quiet, unhurried, eternal. And in that rhythm, Hannah felt her soul align with heaven's heartbeat. The child she once wept for had grown strong in the Lord. The pain that once felt unbearable had been transformed into purpose. She no longer asked for signs or blessings. She simply breathed gratitude. "Lord," she whispered softly, her voice no louder than a sigh, "you were faithful. In every season, you were near. In every silence, you were my peace, even when I did not know it." The lamp flickered gently, as though in response. A quiet reminder that even the smallest flame can hold back the darkness. Take another deep, calming breath. Let your shoulders soften. Let your heart grow quiet. The peace she found is the same peace offered to every heart that chooses to trust. The years had given her more than she had prayed for. They had given her perspective. She now understood that every delay had been grace. Every unanswered question had been preparation. The God who once met her in tears had walked with her through every dawn since. And now, at the end of the day, she rested in his faithfulness. The wind outside shifted gently, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and olive branches. The sound of the night birds echoed softly beyond the fields. And Hannah smiled, not in memory, but in peace. She no longer lived by the ache of what she wanted. She lived by the peace of what she knew. That God is good. That He listens. That He fulfills His word in His own perfect way. Take one last long, peaceful breath before rest. Let her calm become your calm, her peace your peace. For every soul that has cried out in faith will one day find the same stillness, the same quiet joy, the same holy rest that wraps the heart of the faithful in love. And as the night deepened, Hannah closed her eyes, and heaven watched in tender silence over a woman who had finally found her rest. The years continued to unfold like gentle pages in the hands of time. Seasons passed quietly over the hills of Ramah. Spring with its blossoms, summer with its warmth, autumn with its golden hush. And through each turn of the earth, the story of Hannah's faith lived on. The village knew her name, not for wealth, not for power, but for the peace she carried wherever she went. For there was something about her presence, calm, radiant, kind, a quiet assurance that seemed to flow from her like water from a steady spring. She had become living proof that faith remembered by heaven leaves light upon the earth. Take a deep, slow breath. Let it move through you gently, with every inhale. Gather the warmth of her legacy. With every exhale, release the belief that your prayers end only with you. Samuel had grown tall, wise beyond his years. His words carried weight, not because of his age, but because they carried truth. The people listened when he spoke of the Lord, for they could see that the same peace that had once rested on his mother now rested on him. Faith, once born in Hannah's tears, had become an inheritance. She would visit him each year, bringing with her the small robes she had sewn, each one a symbol of love's continuity, each stitch a prayer, quiet, unseen, eternal. The sight of him at the temple filled her eyes with gentle wonder. She saw in him not only her answered prayer, but the evidence of God's continual promise. And she would whisper softly as she watched him, "Thank you, Lord, that what began in sorrow now blesses others in joy." Take another long, calm breath. Let the beauty of that transformation rest in you. For every prayer heard does not end with its answer. It ripples outward, touching lives unseen. Hannah's life became a song, a melody woven into the tapestry of faith itself. And her story, whispered in the evenings, told by firesides, remembered in the hearts of generations, became a reminder that God always listens. There were young women in the village who came to her for comfort. They would pour out their worries and tears. And Hannah, gentle and wise, would smile and take their hands, saying softly, "Do not lose heart. He hears you even when you cannot find the words." The peace in her voice was not something learned. It was something lived. A peace born from the storm she once endured, and refined by years of trust. Take another deep, steady breath. Let that same peace begin to echo in your own soul. When you surrender your pain to God, you create room for others to find hope in your story. The lamp in her home still burned each evening, a small light against the night, a symbol that faith never truly ends. It only changes form. From longing to love, from sorrow to song, from a single prayer to an everlasting legacy. She would often sit beside that lamp at dusk, her eyes lifted toward the stars, her lips moving in quiet gratitude. Every cry you heard, "Lord," became a seed of peace in someone else's heart. And heaven smiled, because it was true. Take one last long, peaceful breath before rest. Let your thoughts grow quiet, your heart soft and open. The legacy of a prayer heard is never lost. It becomes light for others, warmth for the weary, a whisper through time that says, "God still listens." The years had softened everything. The edges of sorrow, the lines of time, even the sound of memory. Hannah was older now, her hair touched with silver, her eyes deep and bright with the calm of one who has walked long with God. The world around her had changed, yet the peace within her had only grown. Each morning, she would rise before the sun, the air cool and quiet, the first light stretching gently across the valley. She would stand at her doorway, the same place where she had once whispered prayers through tears, and she would lift her gaze to the horizon, not to ask, but to thank. Her life had become one long prayer of gratitude. Take a deep, slow breath. Let it move softly through you. With every inhale, gather the stillness of her faith. With every exhale, let go of every restless thought that tries to reach beyond today. In the distance, she could sometimes see the roads leading toward Shiloh, the temple rising faintly beneath the morning light. And though her steps were slower now, her heart still walked those paths in spirit. She would think of Samuel, now a man, a prophet, a servant of God's voice among his people. And she would smile softly, knowing that what once began as her cry had become God's calling in another life. Her prayer had not only been heard, it had been multiplied. She sat near the window one evening, the lamp flickering beside her, the soft hum of the wind brushing against the walls like a familiar friend. And in the glow of that quiet room, she whispered her final evening prayer. Thank you, Lord, for hearing me when I was small, for staying near when I was silent, for teaching me that love grows stronger when placed in your hands. My heart is at rest. My story is yours. Her voice was fragile, but peaceful. And as she spoke, the air seemed to shift around her. A warmth entered the room, gentle, luminous, alive. The presence she had once felt in her tears now surrounded her in calm. Take another deep, slow breath. Let it move like a wave of peace through your body. This is how heaven sounds when it listens, not with noise or thunder, but with the quiet hum of eternal love. Outside, the stars began to rise, one by one, over the hills of Ramah. The same stars that had once heard her cries now shone as witnesses to her joy. And in that light, the story of Hannah became complete. A story not of sorrow, but of surrender. Not of desperation, but of devotion. Not of unanswered prayers, but of love that was heard, and remembered, and fulfilled. Because the prayers of the faithful never fade. They live on, echoing softly through generations, rising with every voice that whispers through the dark. Lord, remember me too. Take one last, deep, peaceful breath before rest. Let your heart settle into stillness. Let your mind drift gently towards sleep. For the same God who heard Hannah still listens tonight. He gathers your sighs, your silence, your hope, and holds them tenderly in His eternal care. You are not forgotten. You are not unseen. You are forever heard in heaven. Rest now in that truth. Rest in the quiet where love listens still.